Greetings shippers, welcome back, and I'm thrilled to announce that this is the first episode of
Hello, we're Mystic Spiral, though we might change our name.
So initially, I was all set to call this Convos with Fans, even though I felt it was a bit too obvious. But then when I launched the video, I got a different suggestion from Fiona and Brian Weber, and a bunch of you seemed to love it, and that was Fanversation. And I was instantly like, that's such a better title, I'm an idiot. So you know what? We're calling this Fanversations. Yes, Fanversations. Thanks so much for suggesting that, and I don't know what's wrong with me that I can't combine the words conversation and fan together. I already discussed what this is in the previous video, so click the card or the link down below if you want to hear more.
Exactly.
Today.
Oh, nice. I wish. I have a Winnie the Pooh.
That's adorable. And I'm wearing my Kiki and Harry.
Oh, nice.
I was like, this would be perfect for the video. But then I sat down, I was like, oh, no one can see it. Anyway.
That happens to me every time I put on a shirt. I'm just like, oh, well, I don't film from that angle, so why did I put this on?
I know, you're like, you get really excited, and then you're like, damn it.
All right. So I guess we should start off by introducing ourselves. So, hi, greetings, shippers. It's Sasha from Shipper's Guide, and I'm here with...
Andrea from Zonko Videos.
Awesome sauce.
I want to make sure this is recording.
So, we are here today to talk about Harry Potter. Because it's always a day to talk about Harry Potter.
Always.
So, what exactly was it that got you into Harry Potter? What drew you into it?
For me, it was... I'm just writing notes as we're going. For me, I never write notes, but I just want this to go smoothly. I should probably write down talking points. For me, I was around 12 when I read the second book. My aunt gave me the second book, and then I just fell in love with it. And she realized I was reading it in the wrong order, so then she bought me the first book. And then the second book. And then, yeah, from then I was hooked. For me, I was around the same age as Harry. It really felt like a friend that was always there. And as an old child, I just felt great to be thrown into this place. And much like Star Wars, it was sort of this, it became this epic franchise.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I got the first book from my grandfather when I was 11. And really, when you're that young, being the same age as the character is pretty much all it takes. I was like, Harry's 11, I'm 11, best friends for life. And it was an interesting concept. And of course, I think every kid secretly wants to go to Hogwarts. So...
Yeah, even though we have Ilvermorny now, it's kind of like...
It's not the same.
It's not, even though people are like, it's the American Hogwarts. Like, there's not enough lore behind it to know what it's about. And
Exactly.
Make a movie, but even then it's like...
Although that is one of the things I love about the Harry Potter universe, is that it's so big and there's so much room for expansion and to play with it. It makes it really interesting.
Yeah. I love that about Harry, that I can always, you know, kind of dive back in and create new things and stuff like that. And there's always an expansion of just that world, no matter where you look.
So I have to ask, how do you feel about Harry as protagonist? Opinions vary widely, so...
I have mixed emotions. I mean, he's this innocent child who's, like, suddenly told he's a... And then, you know, there are times where he's kind of an asshole.
Yeah! I think book 5 was, like, peak him being annoying for me. And book 5 is actually my favorite book, which I know it's not a lot of people's favorite, but it's my favorite. But for me, I was like, Harry, I know stuff is happening to you, but please, like, please get it together.
Please don't be, you know, a normal teenager. Like, that's what I liked also about the books, though, despite the fact they were totally in a different world. You related to them as a teenager while you were growing, and, like, you know, I think also what I loved about the Potter books, like, they were one of the few books that made me actually cry or laugh out loud. And my parents loved the books. My dad would always get the book before me. Like, we would have it delivered, and he would just take it from the mail and read it and then give it to me. And listen to Jim Dale's book on tape. That's how No, it is. I still have the cassette tapes that you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So who was your favorite Harry Potter character? Or is, I should say is.
I have, I have so many. It constantly switched while reading, but I would say other than Hermione,
Mm.
in okay, so I'm gonna split up due to gender. So girls, Hermione, Ginny, Luna, um, and then for boys, I mean I like Harry and Ron. I love Ron. I think he's the loyal friend that everyone wants to have, and I felt for Draco. I felt like this poor boy comes from a terrible family, and as asshole as he is, there's like some good in him somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Felt like that. So I like even Draco, and I love Neville. I like the fact he was a different type of brave.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. For me, I was always kind of weird, and I always gravitated towards the adults in the story more than the kids. And so I guess my first favorite was Gilderoy Lockhart. I know you're not supposed to like him, but I really did.
It's well, he's hilarious.
And also Lupin. I really love Lupin. I just all the hugs in the world for Lupin because he needs them so much. And R.I.P. I'm a huge fan of the fiction where it's all like everybody's still alive and it's all fine.
I know every time I read it, I'm just like all fictions where they're all alive and no one dies. It feels so much better. And
I know.
I'm such a sap for a happy ending sometimes. Like I like the whole like Draco, Ron, and Hermione all become friends.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of, how did you feel about the epilogue?
Oh man. Okay. I had so many mixed emotions. So by the fourth book we all knew like it was cats out of the bag. Ron loves Hermione. So,
Yeah.
okay, they're gonna get together. But Ginny and Harry, I always felt a little angry. I was happy when I read it at that age, but as I got older I was kind of like, she basically waited for him.
Mm.
That concerned me a little bit as a woman. I was like, she didn't quite wait, but when she had the opportunity to be with him again, she sort of just.
Mm-hmm.
I had mixed emotions. I can't really say I didn't like it because I like that stuff. I'm a romantic, but then on the other hand, like, damn it, Ginny, you should have been with Neville.
For me, like I have mixed feelings about it too. Like on one hand I like it, but on the other hand I felt it was just kind of underdeveloped. Like I felt that there were more reasons for them to be together that they didn't fully explore, especially after like book 2 and all of her possession and everything. And I was like, oh, like they kind of share that link of this weird unwanted connection with Voldemort and stuff, and it was just like never mentioned. And I was like, oh, that would have been really cool. I'm intrigued, but.
Yeah, I felt it would have been important, like, if for people that didn't read the book, they wouldn't really, even in the movies, it's not really explained like that very well, that she was possessed and stuff. Like, it just, in the books, I felt like it was explained better, that she was possessed by Voldemort, and then when they do get married in the books, well, rather in the epilogue, you're kind of, it's sort of justified because they do share that connection. And then I sort of feel like, on the other hand, like, I have all my fanfic ships.
Same.
Where I'm like, I love what J.K. Rowling did, and eventually I was like, I love it, and there's a lot of room to play with the canon. Like Draco ending up with Astoria, you're kind of like, oh, that's so random and weird, and we've never really, I don't recall her ever in the books.
That's the thing, is like I'm mixed too because I like it, but at the same time there's the cynic in me is like, oh, so everybody got with their high school sweetheart and it was all perfect.
Yeah, I kind of was like, when I first read the books and when I became a teenager, by the third book I was like, oh, they're just going to be friends forever and they're going to marry different people and they'll be at each other's weddings, and by the fourth book I was like, that's not going to happen. And when Ginny and Harry kissed, I'll admit it, I like squealed out loud. I was so excited for her, and I thought it was such a well-written scene of just like after the Quidditch, and I thought like, oh, what an interesting way to do a first kiss. And I also kind of felt like at the same time like angered at Ginny for, and and angered at Harry that he finally noticed her when she stopped paying attention. But it's very true to life.
It is true to life, but it is annoying to see it play out at the same time. We're like, oh, Harry, come on. So when did you start getting into the fan fiction?
Interestingly enough, probably around 13, which I think is like normal age to go on the internet. And I started writing fan fiction myself. I actually didn't know that it was called fan fiction. I didn't know, and my dad's like, yeah, it's called, this has a name, what you're doing, taking the characters, putting them in a completely your own story. It's called fan fiction, and I typed it in Internet Explorer back then, and I found what fan fiction was, and I fell in love with it. I love reading when I can't sleep, like a good fan fiction. So for me, it sort of came from the love of writing, and then just sort of discovering the rest of it.
So what is your favorite Harry Potter fan fiction to read or write?
I like writing them after the epilogue, mostly. And I like writing a mystery. I've been trying to do this for a while, a Sherlock Harry Potter crossover, which is really difficult because I'm like, I don't know whether to make like Molly Hooper or John a wizard or a witch, or what makes sense to do. How would they even meet, kind of thing. But yeah, my favorite ones to read are generally after the epilogue, where they're all trying to adjust to normal life. The most recent one I read was actually a Ginny and Neville one, and where Harry dies instead of lives, and then she's forced to marry Neville because the wizarding world is backwards. So I was like, that's kind of weird, okay. But the whole story was really sweet and romantic, actually. They fall in love, and she's pregnant with Harry's kid, and he raises the baby. So it sort of had a lot of adult themes of like dealing with grief and loss, and I was like, this is really well written. I have no idea what the name is. I just always go to Google and type in like such and such fan fiction.
No, I gravitate back to, for me, I always found fan fiction for Harry Potter particularly interesting because it changed so much as the books came out, because it was such a unique situation where you have all these fictions from years ago when people weren't sure what was going to happen, and so there were all these projections, and then you have all the new fiction from people coming in after the conclusion or after it's all done. And it's really interesting because some of the fictions from that middle part where everybody was waiting, I really enjoy, and I kind of miss that, you know, the not knowing element and people just projecting into the future void like that.
Oh my god, yeah. I wrote a fan fiction actually shortly after the third book, which Harry eventually, you know, kind of living their lives through Hogwarts and then like marrying. But in that, I also like made Draco their friend. And I did enjoy some of that unknown aspect. And then I was hoping that some of what parts of that you've written in fan fiction that you hoped would come to life in the actual books, like what you know, like that thought process of like, oh, I hope Cho and Harry actually get together, or you know.
Do you ever feel that the canon can be stifling in a way, that for some people it kind of stifles what they want to do with stuff?
Yes, absolutely. That's an interesting question, because I realize that now that I'm like 30 and writing fan fiction now and then, like how I'm sort of like, oh, I sort of wonder if it's like, do I like the way J.K. Rowling really ended it? Because part of me is like, just so much hate for Draco.
I know, so much.
Just so much hate. I'm like, but you created this character. I don't understand. You know, even if I'm writing like a villainous character, I would, you know, they're still a character. So I feel like you can change them in the way you want them to be. I felt like Draco had so many opportunities in the canon. So for example, like 6th book before he kills Dumbledore, you know, he could have said, you know what, lowered his wand and ended up going with Harry. And for me, like the canon that he didn't solidifies him all the time as like the Death Eater. When he does get with Astoria at the end, it's so... It angered me a little bit. I was just like, who is this person?
I'm mixed too. Like, I really like J.K. Rowling, and I love her work, and I think it's so great, but at the same time, I don't think it's above critique, and sometimes it amuses me how surprised she seems to be by which characters and stuff people gravitate towards. Like, sometimes she's so genuinely like, how could anybody ever want those two together? And I'm like, well, there are lots of ways that I could see it. And sometimes, like, saying like too much, but sometimes I really like to examine the just kind of problems with Hogwarts when you follow through some of the reasoning. The sorting of the children into the various houses from 11 years old by personality trait, and the treatment of poor maligned Slytherins. We are not so bad. Slytherins are misunderstood.
They aren't. As a Gryffindor, I love Slytherin, and my ill-performing house is Horny Serpent. At one point, I did get into Slytherin. It was really weird. I went on Pottermore and like got into all the houses. Just curious to see if I could break the algorithm. And when I officially did it, I was like, oh, I'm a Gryffindor. But I'm all for like Slytherin and Gryffindor loves coming together. Love that, and I love the video you did with Rebecca on that. I thought that was pretty cool.
That was a lot of fun. It was really funny when she first got into Slytherin. She was so upset. We were at the office, and she was like, I'm a Slytherin. How is this possible? And we were like, no, Slytherin is good. It's good to be in Slytherin. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Complex characters are from Slytherin. Draco, Snape, Slughorn, Peter Skeeter, Andromeda, which is his mom.
Yeah.
I feel so nerdy, like, naming all the characters. Like, when I get into Harry Potter, people are like, you really like this. I'm just like, yeah. So good when you read the books or watch the movie. And I watched, I don't know if it's on YouTube. It's a BBC documentary with J.K. Rowling discussing the real magic in Harry Potter, but like parts of history where people studied alchemy. Like Nicholas Flamel was a real person, or based off a real person, which is really interesting. So it has all these really fascinating elements to it.
It's more than just the text, which is why I think it's endured for so long and will continue to, because while it is a complete story, there's so much room to play around and so much more to explore. Speaking of, did you read The Cursed Child?
I did. Oh, so many emotions.
What was the predominant one?
Well, my first one was like, well, J.K. Rowling clearly didn't write this. And my second one was, sounds so pompous, I can write much better fan fiction. I felt like such an asshole when reading that and like thinking that and just like wishing I had written something and J.K. Rowling approved it. Like,
I understand that reaction though, because there are lots of elements where it was very similar to stuff I had read as fan fiction that had been better written. But Rebecca told me that she saw it as a play and that it's much better as a play, which I can believe. I can believe it plays out very well, but at the same time, that doesn't fix a lot of the plot elements for me that were just kind of out of place, especially jerk dad Harry.
Yeah, I'm like, Harry would never tell his kid what, basically the equivalent of like, I wish you weren't born or something like that. Like, Harry would never do that.
It's fine to be in Slytherin until you are. So.
And like, I think the one thing they did right was give Draco this redemption arc. I think a lot of fans were kind of like, that's great. That's another thing, the whole sorting thing, like you had mentioned, like in the canon and also like even in this Cursed Child story and play, it's just kind of like, oh, they're still doing that and there's still people that don't want to mingle. Like I thought they made it clear at the end of the 7th book, like that aren't exactly, they're the gray area, but a lot of them are good people,
And can we really trust that hat? it can be bargained with. Harry talked his way out of Slytherin, so I don't know if I trust that hat's judgment very much.
True, although some people say they want the hat wanted to put him in Slytherin because part of Voldemort's soul was in him. So people feel like that.
I buy that, but part of me, those were some of my favorite fics to read, actually. Harry was in Slytherin the whole time.
Yeah.
Some of those are really well written. They're just very interesting. I'm a big fan of Dark Harry because there's so much unexplored potential there for an evil Harry that's just good
Oh yeah, he could have totally been easily evil. I mean, the abuse he endured at the Dursleys. That was another thing that kind of bothered me a little bit as I got older. I was kind of like, why aren't social services called? Like, Harry clearly looks abused. Like, at least, like, it's, you know.
That was why I had a hard time connecting with Dumbledore as I got older, because it always felt like he placed him there to make sure he turned out the way he wanted, that he wasn't too arrogant, that he had the proper disposition for the heroic sacrifice he was supposed to make, and then ultimately didn't really have to. And it always just made me kind of lukewarm towards his character, but then that was another thing where JK was like, he's a hero, love him, and I was like, I can't. I'm trying.
Yeah, I was kind of like, what I love though about her characters and all the houses and the Harry Potter verse is they're complex. They're not black and white. They're all gray. Someone wrote this great anecdote of why Ron is actually racist in the sense that he didn't like squibs, he kind of like was very weird about squibs, and I didn't really catch that at first, but there's this small line in one of the books where he tells Harry, I think the first book, where he tells Harry, my mom's cousin's a squib, but I think he's an accountant or something, sort of implying that the Weasleys, as open as they are, don't even talk to their squib cousin. And it was interesting because even though it went by sort of like most readers' heads and didn't notice it, when I read the anecdote, I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. And it said, no character, at the end of this very long anecdote, that no character is completely morally perfect in Harry. Which, that's kind of the thing with Dumbledore. He isn't morally perfect.
No, he's not. I'm glad of that. It makes it really rewards you when you reread.
Yeah.
Because there's always something new. Every time I reread it, there's something new there.
It's interesting because I like reading like 4 books at the same time. I have a book reading problem. I just read like a whole bunch of books all at once. But I'm rereading the Potter series, and I'm in the middle of the 3rd book. I'm rereading them for the 2nd time in my life, and it's so weird rereading them at the age of 30 and spotting all the little details that you didn't know were important. Sorcerer's Stone, when Hagrid arrives on the bike. All these little things.
How are you enjoying it now versus how you enjoyed it when you first read it back in the day?
Oh, good question. I think I appreciate it more. Oddly enough, like as a kid, it kind of blew your mind and you're excited to be immersed in the world. But as an adult, it's very hard to find good writing.
Yeah.
It's an amazing feeling to kind of go back into that world, and you're kind of like, it's interesting to re-meet the characters, and you sort of have you try to, I don't know if you go through this, but when I'm rereading, I'm kind of like, well, I know these characters, and I try to wipe that from my mind and see if I can see them in a whole new light.
When I'm rereading or rewatching anything, I'm always just surprised because sometimes the characters that I gravitate towards are completely different than they were the first time I viewed something, just because the perspectives in my life have changed. I'm actually rewatching Mad Men right now, and I forgot to turn it off, so it's still back there.
I was like, oh, that's a freeze frame. Okay.
And the first time I watched it, I was not sympathetic to Betty at all. And I was just like, bored housewife, whatever. Now that I'm at home with my own daughter on mat leave, I have so much more sympathy. It's just, I understand so much better what that plot line is. And when I recently reread Harry Potter, it was fascinating to me which characters I gravitated back towards, and which ones I warmed up to, which ones I wasn't so warm on anymore. Like when I was a kid and reading the fourth one, I was all about Cedric Diggory. He was perfect. I loved him, and now I'm kind of like, Cedric Diggory, he's all right.
Interesting.
Also, the cursed child did not help that with the whole "if he'd lived, he'd be evil" thing. That did not.
Yeah, I kind of felt like they threw that in there to be like, there is an evil Hufflepuff. I was kind of like,
do you think it's different for fans who are coming to the series now versus fans like us who grew up with it because of the intense waiting period that there was, versus now it's kind of all just laid out for you? You can just power through.
I feel like there's such a difference. Well, one is, I think what's interesting is because it came out in the 90s, and it's like we were that last generation where we sort of had this waiting period, of sort of books to come out, not binge watching, waiting for that show to come on Sunday night. We're used to that, and it's sort of this weird lost nostalgia that we still, we appreciated how long it took to wait for that book. When that book would arrive on my door, I'd be so excited and read it for hours. I remember my mom taking the book out of my hand at 6 a.m. because I didn't go to sleep. She was so mad at me, but at the same time, she was so excited that I was reading. That was another thing. Before Potter, I wasn't really, and I think all kids go through this phase. As big as readers as my parents were, I was sort of trying to rebel against that up till 12 when I read Harry Potter. And then just got really into books from that moment on. It really introduced the world of literature to me. And I was a creative writing major in college. So for me, it really was like I wanted to write stories.
So then how do you feel about that mindset that some people have, that writing fan fiction closes you off from ever writing your own fiction? Because I don't feel that is accurate at all. I think it can be, but I don't think it necessarily has to be.
That's so interesting. I've actually never heard that thought. For me, I feel like fan fiction is a brain exercise. It may not be your own characters, but you're creating a whole new world with these characters. And I feel like, it's a great writing exercise. I think the hardest thing was in one of my classes, my last semester, was we had to write our own story. And the hardest thing is making a story original, and I wanted to write like X-Men meets Harry kind of a thing, but like without those characters, and it was really difficult. But I don't think it's because I wrote a ton of fan fiction. I just think it's because I didn't practice a lot with my own characters, and I think it's to get a little comfortable with these characters. Sometimes I'll write a fan fiction, like yesterday I was writing a fan fiction about like Draco, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and I got kind of bored in the middle of it, and then I just erased the whole thing and tried to start all over again. So I think we get very complacent with certain ways we write, and I don't think fan fiction can hold you back at all. I think it helps you, but I think we have to also practice our own characters as well in order for it to be a helpful process.
So you're still writing fan fiction. How do you feel about that perception that a lot of people have that fan fiction is all written by tweeny 13-year-old girls screaming in a corner?
I get so annoyed when I hear that, because for me it's cathartic, it's relaxing, it's therapeutic, it feels good, it allows my brain to sort of do some work without really like being stressed. Yeah, I feel like people who say that kind of just either write really bad fan fiction, or they're just bullies.
Have you ever written for characters that you dislike or for a ship that you dislike?
Yeah, I really wanted to see if I could. The Ginny and Draco, I don't know how they would ever work. Or the one that I disdain the most, because that I could get by. The Ginny and Draco, I tried to do that last night. For me, the one I don't like at all is Harry and Hermione, and that's
really?
The hardest thing for me to write. Yeah, I cannot ship them together at all. For me personally, like I could see them getting together, and I think it's because what I liked about Harry and Hermione, I feel like Ron, Harry, and Hermione represented in the series two types of friendships. Harry and Hermione were platonic, while, Ron and her became a romance. So for me, writing Harry and Hermione is very difficult, just because I feel like, they don't look at each other that way.
That's really interesting to me. That is not the normal no TP that I get. Normally I get like a Hermione or something is what people tell me that they can't get behind.
Who's your favorite ship? And
my favorite is Snoopin. It's Snape and Lupin. Yeah, it started after book 3 because I was always a Snape fangirl, even though all of the descriptions and all of his actions really made it that I shouldn't have been, but I still was.
No, I loved Snape because I was like, he can't be that bad of a guy. Like, he's just angry.
I know, even though as an adult, looking back at it, that behavior is not okay, but as a child, I was still very invested. I was like, he's a mean teacher. It's normal. It's not weird, so...
He just hates kids.
Yeah, he's just a teacher that hates kids.
How did you feel about the people? Because I get so enraged when I see people say things like Snape's love wasn't warranted for Lily, or that he was even going as far as saying he was an abuser. And I feel like, okay, there was some aspect of abuse, at least mentally, to poor Neville.
Oh, yes.
But I don't think to say his love was unwarranted. I feel like that's...
I have I think, an interesting viewpoint about that, wherein even though the series is from a third-person perspective, the person whose third-person perspective we are following most of the time is Harry. So it's Harry's view of the world. So even watching it, like reading it rather, as a child, it was kind of like, is he right? Is it as bad as he thinks it is?
Right,
kind of thing.
He's an unreliable narrator in a sense.
Maybe, like, he might be completely reliable, but I'm a fan of the unreliable narrator, so whenever I'm reading anything, it's always interesting for me to ponder, can I trust what this character is saying, or is there a completely other way to look at it? And that way, it helps me redeem a lot of characters who otherwise would not be very redeemable based on what's just happening in the canon.
Yeah, it's sort of the same thing with, like, The Great Gatsby, where it's being told through this unreliable narrator, and it makes, you kind of, you question a lot of it. You're like, Harry, is Draco really this much of an asshole?
Is he that bad?
Is he that mean? Like, he called Hermione, a mudblood, and we all know that's horrible. But besides being a kid bully, I feel like as they got older, he wasn't so much around in the books.
He kind of tapered off, except for how obsessed Harry was with him, especially in book 6. That obsession just skyrockets right up to...
Yeah, and that's where the whole Drarry concept comes from.
I do like Drarry. Not as much as other ships, but I understand why so many people gravitate towards Drarry. The opposites, the enemies to friends, the potential that Draco has that a lot of people felt was unexplored, particularly to be their friends, because it always seemed like Draco didn't have real friends. And that was sad.
It was. And what's interesting is, I feel like people, they could be a bully and then, grow up to realize, like, hey, I was an asshole and change.
And apologize for it.
Yeah, or even, like, in the process of being a teenager, you're kind of like, you know what, I want to make a new turnover, a new leaf. And I feel like a lot of people, like with the Dramione ship, which that was the first video I ever watched that you did. I was so excited how you spoke about both parts. Like, some people see potential in it, some people don't. But I could see that happening. I mean, I could see him apologizing for what a terrible person he is. And then, of course, he called her a mudblood, which is,
It's hard to get past, but it's not unworkable. And that's the thing with fiction and fan fiction for me, which is it can be an exercise in different narrative storytellings. It doesn't have to be an exact mirror of how you view the world or an exact mirror of your of your viewpoints or what you think should happen in real life in a real situation, which I think a lot of people, when they look at fandom, especially these days, they expect it to be you ship Draco and Hermione, for example, you're okay with the fact that he called her a mudblood. And that's not necessarily the case at all. It's a bit reductive, I find, when some people examine ships in that way, which is why I always like to do the pros and the cons, because it's easy to get caught up in one way of looking at a ship, especially if you're passionate about another ship or something.
Right. Like, I'm aware there's, like, for me, as much as I cannot see Harry and Hermione together, like, for example, I'm totally understanding of people that do. And I'm pretty sure that makes a lot of sense, because it's like a lot of people hate Ron. There's a lot of Ron haters. I love Ron. I felt so upset. I felt the way the movie, I watched an interesting video yesterday about the girls are wiser trope, women are wiser trope. And it was about how they sort of switched in the movies Ron and Hermione's roles, where Hermione, like, didn't know what mudblood meant, and then Ron explained it. Or even in the Devil's Snare, Ron was like, "Are you a witch or not?" The book was changed to her being like, "I remember what it is." Those were the moments that I loved the most in the book, and when I saw that in the movie, I was kind of like, "That's not how it happened."
Which movie was your favorite out of all of them?
I would say the third one.
A lot of people say that, yeah.
I love the director. Guillermo del Toro is in or no, it wasn't Guillermo del Toro.
Oh, it's I know, I'll put the name up on the screen. Mine was the second. A lot of people don't like the second because they say it's too close of an adaptation, which I find to be a very interesting complaint. Yeah, that's what a lot of people say about the first two. They say they're too closely adapted, which for me, that's a good thing. But yeah, I guess some people want a bit of a shift in the medium, maybe. So that's fine too. But
that was something that bothered me. Like, I would have sat through, and I'm sure a lot of Potter fans would say this, they would have sat through hours if it had every detail of the book. But looking at the third book, I forgot how big it was, how thick it was, how much detail is in it. And I could understand why they cut some stuff out. The second one I actually felt was kind of, in terms of film, there was a lot of closeness to the book, but at the same time I felt like it was, I don't know, I felt like something was missing. I don't know what it was that was missing. I just felt like, not necessarily a detail, but just the way it was directed, maybe.
A lot of people say that they don't feel it has heart. It might just be because I love Kenneth Branagh so much that he is overpowering all things.
For her, when he was playing Gilderoy, she was like, yes! My parents are also Potter fans. So my dad uses, because he's a school psychologist, and adjuncts as a professor, so he actually uses the 4 houses to explain personality types.
That's really cool.
It was really funny. And he was like, yeah, like I make a little spiel about it, and then we get into the actual psychology, and I was like, oh, interesting.
It's really fascinating seeing Potter enter the academic sphere, because I remember all the backlash from some groups when it first came out, and don't read it, sorcery, witchcraft, it's all pop culture, and now to see it enter the annals of academia like that and become one of those juggernauts of pop culture is very fascinating, having lived through it and seen it make that transformation from just kind of fluff to full-on actual work that people respect and take seriously.
Yeah, and like that's when I was watching the BBC documentary with my parents actually, and my mom said, why is it so magical? Like in sort of a wispy, wanting to be in that world way. And she brought up the fact, something interesting, that a lot of the authors from England who have written children's novels transcend to adulthood, like Alice in Wonderland and all these sort of, for whatever reason, it's, the English touch, I guess, magic and all that. But it's it's interesting to see, because even J.K. Rowling was like, she's put in the British Library exhibit now, and she's the only living author to do so. She's like right next there to to a bunch of other famous authors. It's amazing. And, you know, to see that happen is amazing.
It's one of those things you don't really think about, and then you realize, oh wow, this thing that I loved as a child and is still important is important to so many other people. It's just, it's nice, although not for the people who hate Harry Potter. That must be annoying, but still.
Yeah, I have a friend who like couldn't get into it, and I was like, man. And then today I showed her a picture of Matthew Lewis, the guy who played Neville. I was like, you should watch Harry Potter because puberty. And like there was Neville and there was Matthew Lewis, and she was like, well, I wasn't a fan before, but she actually sent me. I woke up to like a Harry Potter boudoir shoot. She sent me, not of her, but like of a random like Tumblr thing. Like, this is amazing. Thanks.
Do you ever find yourself involved in any like hierarchical discussions about book fans versus movie fans, or does that kind of thing not matter to you at all?
I've never actually discussed it, but I would like to. I've never had anyone. I'm like, it's weird. I discovered that a couple of my friends love Potter, but not as much as me. My friend, she's a Slytherin, and my other friends are Ravenclaw, and I'm really into Potter, and they're not. Like, it's weird. Like, they liked it for that time in their life, and they have a couple of mugs. When I found out they were Potter fans, I got really hyped. And they were like, yeah, I just like it. And that was it. Like that.
Are you like this with any other fandom, or is it just Potter for you?
It's interesting. I would say I'm like this also with Star Wars, but I would say Potter because it hit me at a certain age. Where Star Wars was more my parents' generation. And I grew up, that was like the first, you know, my dad was a big love of films and movies, and so he sat me down to watch things like Aeon Flux, Kurosawa, and also anime and all these other different things. And me, Star Wars was sort of like the first franchise I really liked, but, you know, 4, 5, and 6, the originals from the 70s.
Yeah.
But Harry Potter, I lived, breathed, ate Harry Potter. Like, I love it. And I think part of that is just like, yeah, I was 12. I'm an only child, so for me, I think it truly felt like a friend that was always there.
Yeah, because that's always fascinating to me, because I always wonder what is it that makes some people hold on to their fandom while others let it go. Because when I did the Q&A, there was somebody who was saying that they had just turned 18 pretty much, and all their friends were just dropping off, essentially. And we're like, well, we're adults now, time to put all that stuff back in the box. And she was by herself, kind of like, oh, nobody wants to talk about any of this stuff anymore. And I just find that fascinating, because I do find that that is an attitude that certain people have and then certain people don't. And I'm always curious what it is that keeps certain people there. Like, people like me just diehards forever, and other people are just kind of like, well, it's over. So
yeah, no, that's kind of what it is. Like, other people exactly have that reaction. Like, I'm old now, so I'm not going to do this. And I'm like, well, I'm 30, and I still love Star Wars and Harry Potter. And I feel like it's sad that I have a friend who's really much like the way I love Potter. He loves Star Wars, and also lives, breathes, eats it. And then there are times where, like, as much as I love Star Wars, like, I'll be at his house and we'll start talking, and he's like, do you know who this character is? And he'll, like, play me a video. I'm like, I'm sorry. But he's like, oh, okay. And he got, like, really sad, and he went into... But I'm like that with Potter, so I get kind of like, really? Let me tell you everything. I think I hold on to it because I feel like it's silly to let go of something so long.
I think it's harmless. If you enjoy something and you're into it and you're doing all the stuff you're supposed to do, it doesn't matter how old you are. As long as it's not impairing your life and you're not on the street corners, like, lined up 5 blocks in advance for something, then I think it's really fine.
I'm just, like, imaging all the people that have, like, gone to all the... I mean, I never went to a midnight showing. I don't think
I didn't for that. I've gone for other things. Oh my god, the craziest midnight showing was not Harry Potter. It was Batman: The Dark Knight Rises. That was insane. My friends and I showed up 2 hours before, and we didn't see anybody. So we thought, we're good, we're on time, let's go get some food. We came back, we realized they were all in the theater. They were all already sitting inside.
Oh my god.
There were no seats. We had to beg people because we had tickets to shove over and let us sit together. It was horrible.
Oh man.
Another crazy midnight was the Hunger Games. The Hunger Games got really... There were some angry parents at the Hunger Games midnight showing. It was so bad, we had to divide into 2 lines, right? So there was one line, and they had to create a back line, and we were going to the back line, and one father just got so angry. We've been here for an hour, we deserve to be in this front line. And I was like, it's the Hunger Games, please calm down.
I read only the first book in the Hunger Games. I didn't get to read the other 2. I don't know what happened. I just sort of fell off. And was just like, I'll just watch the movies. Which the first book was a perfect adaptation. I mean, the first movie of the book. And yeah, the rest of the movies were really not that great. No.
I feel the opposite. I felt that they got better as they went on.
Really?
Yeah, I kind of got more invested. The first one, I didn't feel the acting and everything was on point, and they missed a lot of details, I felt. But as they went on, they still missed tons of details, but I felt it solidified itself more into its own universe, which is difficult to do when you're adapting something.
Yeah.
Which was part of what I felt was lost somewhat in the Harry Potter adaptations, because the books are so huge. By the end, I kind of wished it was a TV series, because there was so much.
I was having that discussion with my parents. They were like, they should have made this a TV series, like for HBO or for like...
Yeah.
We didn't have Netflix back then, but, you know, if we did, it would definitely be a Netflix series. Do you think someone will adapt Harry Potter into a series?
I think it is something we'll see readapted in the future, especially with how much it's becoming part of pop culture. I do think someone will try to adapt it again, because I don't think the sentiment that there was a lot missed out on is like a small one, especially as it went on and on. So if not that, maybe some other smaller facets, kind of how they're doing the Fantastic Beasts and all of that stuff. Like maybe we'll see even more side kind of Harry Potter stuff pop up, maybe even with the additional information that she keeps putting on Pottermore and all of that jazz. How do you feel about that, by the way? The continual additions, like little add-ons to canon and stuff.
I love them. Some of them I'm just kind of like, eh. Some of them like, I didn't really need to know this, but okay. This was nice. You know, so it's a nice, she keeps up with her fans in terms of Pottermore. Like I've written to J.K. Rowling on Twitter, and she hasn't answered. But she has a busy life. I tweeted at her, actually, for Halloween, I dressed up as Tonks, when she transforms into Harry, so I posted that on Twitter. And it's like, Happy Halloween, J.K. Rowling. And hoping she would respond to that. But yeah, having this sort of thing with her, with Pottermore, it's nice. It shows that she really loves that world. On the other hand, I know a lot of people have said, like, well, can she write something else? It's always such a weird argument. I'm like, well, didn't you like Harry? Like, why wouldn't you enjoy the fact she's still on Pottermore and doing all this stuff?
For me, the other argument I've heard against that is that she keeps retroactively altering her canon to what fans will like sometimes, which I do sometimes kind of see a bit of, and I can understand that argument, because sometimes I love it, and other times I'm like, please just leave it alone, step away from the keyboard, back up. I think that might be where some people are coming from when they say, can she write anything else, which I do feel is disingenuous, because, like, Potter was really good, so, and she can write other things. She has written other stuff. It just hasn't risen to the same level as Potter did, because, well, how many things do? So
it's a hard act to follow, and I felt bad when the Casual Vacancy. So someone gave it to me as a Christmas present, her book, The Casual Vacancy, and I didn't get past the first few pages, and I think because I was so in love with the way she wrote Potter, it was very hard for me to kind of like see an adult book. And maybe now that years have passed, I'll read it now. But I think at that moment, I was sort of angered by, like, not angered, that's not the word, but kind of like, this isn't the J.K. Rowling I know.
It's very much like an actor who gets typecast, who always has to do the same role over and over, which I think is why she had the pseudonym for a while. writing under the male name. I felt bad when that got outed for her. Because I was, if you want to write, like, if people want to write under a pseudonym, leave them alone. They can write under whatever name they want. If they're writing under a pseudonym, it's for a reason. So just let it be, kind of thing. But now I see they're marketing it like that, like written by J.K. Rowling. So I guess it's working out. So.
And that was another thing too. How did you feel when I saw this interview with her and she spoke about the fact that the authors had said to her she has to write it as J.K. Rowling, not Joanne Catherine or not Joanne Rowling, because, you know, little boys aren't going to read it as much. How did you feel when they were like, you have to write it with, like, initials and stuff?
I felt that I have a hard time imagining that that was their real reason to get the little boys. I really feel that it just had to be name recognition, because that was already, I don't know, initials are good though, because I worked in marketing for a little bit, and initials are good because they sound cool and because you're wondering what the initials stand for. Not that her own name isn't good. I really want to see if there is any actual research about boys not reading female authors as much, because I just remember reading as a child, never even really looking at the author's name. So as terrible as that was, like, not when I first picked it up, like, maybe if I liked it afterwards, be like, oh, who wrote this, because I want to read more. But initially picking it up, I don't ever remember looking down and being like, oh, boy author, putting it down, kind of. So I really want to see the research. Whenever I hear any claims like that, I always want to hear the research. It's like when Young Justice got canceled, and the rumor was that it was canceled because it had an older female demographic, and that wasn't the demographic they wanted to adopt, and so the show ended up falling apart. That was only partially true. What it ended up being was that they had a toy contract, and the toys they were marketing were for the 8 to 13-year-old young boy range. And because they hadn't gotten that, they weren't selling the toys. So it was really more of a case of poor marketing, because you shouldn't be marketing a TV show like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles anymore. Don't make the toys before the show. So for me, it was just very much a poor marketing decision that ended up cascading into a lot of other things. So when I heard that, I always just wonder if I always worry about articles being reductive to get the best headlines. Like, oh, this will cause the most outrage and this sounds the best, but it's always, I find, more complex than what they say. Yeah, but that's how I feel, because that was the whole thing behind my channel, is I love finding out as many different viewpoints of a situation as possible, because people get so passionate when something happens, especially when it just happens. It's hard to, at times, peel it back and see all the other things that are going on.
Yeah, like look at the facts and stuff like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very true.
Because I love J.K. Rowling's interviews, because she's just so upfront with how she feels. So even when I don't agree with her, it's so great that she just puts her opinion out there like that.
Yeah, I love it. I saw an interview which seemed to blow people's minds away. It was like a while ago on YouTube, and it was her admitting that Hufflepuff is her favorite house.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed so interesting how many people were like, what? She just said this to, make Hufflepuff popular and all that stuff. It's kind of like, but none of the houses are bad.
No, they're really not. They've all got strong points and weak points.
Yeah.
Has anything she said in an interview ever changed how you looked at anything in the series, or not?
Her disdain for Draco made me constantly, I constantly was like, maybe he is that bad. Maybe I'm just being a fangirl. So there are moments, but I like the fact she does defend Snape and saying he's a great character and you can't really make him into a saint, and you can't really make him into, a good guy. Mm-hmm. He was complex. How do you feel? Okay, this really bothers me.
Okay.
How do you feel like James Potter is a bully, and that's never addressed anywhere?
That has always driven me absolutely insane. Insane. There was this image of James Potter as just this wonderful, handsome, perfect Prince Charming, and then you see in his memories, especially in 5, that No, that was not the case. And even when I heard about the Marauders and their map and their mischief and the prank with Lupin, it was kind of a warning. It's just like, this group doesn't sound like the best friend group. It sounds like there might have been some dynamics going on in this group that need to be addressed, especially with James Potter, because I couldn't believe that Snape would hate somebody that irrationally for no reason. So it was like, there has to be something more here. And then the fact that it just never really went anywhere. And the same with Sirius. I'm one of the few people who does not like Sirius Black. I'm prepared to be crucified. It's fine. It happens whenever I say that.
Why don't you like him? I find it interesting to discuss why people like or dislike characters. So why don't you like him?
Well, for one thing, I never really connected, was one thing. And I think I got on a bit of an anti-hype train. You know, when everybody loves a character and you're lukewarm, and then their hype starts to push you a bit further back because you're not fully understanding it. And the role he played, especially in the Lupin werewolf Snape prank in the past, just really rubbed me the wrong way. And the fact that James had to go save him, and it was like, because they were portraying it that they were these great, wonderful friends, and it was just like, he's your friend. How could you do that? This horrible condition that he has that's ruined his life, to use it against someone just because you dislike them like that. And I know, they were children, people change. He went to Azkaban, he lived a horrible life with Dementors, but it just always bothered me. And I know that lots of people really liked him because, Harry finally had family and there was that closeness. But then again, I wasn't nuts about Harry either, so.
What did you like or dislike about Harry?
I liked how realistic Harry was. I did like that he felt like a real teenage boy. And he felt like especially the parts about his crushes, his likes, his dislikes, his fears, those were all really well handled, I thought. I just found him to be bratty at times, even in spite of his circumstances and how bad they were, which they were. They really were. But I just found that sometimes he rounded the bend into being a bit bratty and entitled. And I know that for many people, his circumstances completely cancel that out because he has to go back to the Dursleys, and that's terrible. But I don't know. I didn't ever end up liking him as much as his friends. As much as, say, like Neville or Hermione or Ron or even Draco or Luna or any of those other people. I just always found myself liking everybody around him more than him, which always made me feel bad. But I do enjoy, like, fictions that expand him a bit. I guess maybe now I think about what it boils down to is, even though he is the protagonist, I wish he was a bit more expanded upon, because a lot of the fictions I would read would be about, dark Harry, missing scenes with Harry escaping from the Dursleys, someone coming and saving him, and all of that stuff. So I guess maybe I just wanted more from him, which is weird because he's the protagonist.
No, that makes a lot of sense, because I would say the fourth, but he is like a teenager. I mean, the way Ron and Harry treat Pavarti and Padma Patil at the dance always bothered me, because I'm like, be gentlemen, damn it. Like, so that always bothered me, because it kind of showed different sides of both of them with these both characters, where I was kind of like, wow, they are, what I loved about Harry, Ron, and Hermione was that they felt very real. Hermione, many girls find themselves in Hermione. For me, she was bookish, she kind of just kept to herself, and she didn't mind having friends, but she was totally fine being alone, and that's something that I related to, where I could be with a group or be alone. And it's nice to have friends, which is something that she it's not a crutch for her.
Yeah.
She genuinely is like, okay, these people are cool. And with Ron, I always liked the fact he was truly loyal to Hermione and to Harry. Even when he and Hermione were arguing, I always loved the fact that there are these two people that, were strong-headed and had opinions and didn't really care if each other didn't like them or not. And I felt like their characters, I wouldn't say couldn't do any wrong, because I was really upset again with how Ron and Harry treated Padma and Pavarti at the dance. I saw Ron sort of had this weird, I wouldn't say hatred towards house elves, but he sort of had this No.
He was not as sympathetic to the House Elf cause.
Definitely. What do you feel about Neville? Because a lot of people have different emotions about him. Because I loved him as a character. Adorably shy and grows up to be this really awesome person.
I liked Neville a lot. I always wished there was more Neville. Because one of the things that really fascinated me was the idea of the prophecy being about Neville. And to me, that would have been so interesting if there was this parallel storyline of Neville in the background kind of coming into his own, and actually it was him the whole time. And for me, I always wanted more because he was always this character that things were happening to in the background, and it was like, somebody help Neville. Somebody please go help Neville. He needs a hug. Snape's bullying him again. Everybody's going to the dance without him, having adventures without him, and
he's just hanging out. Well, my dad and I, when the prophecy was actually revealed, I remember listening to the cassette on Jim Dale, the 4th book. And my dad and mom and I were in the car, and my dad was like, imagine if, no, the 5th book, sorry. Imagine if Neville was the chosen one, and that Harry was just this normal wizard. All these things, and I had the most 14-year-old reaction. I was like, that would be awful. I was so angry at that idea. And my dad's like, why? And I was like, because it's Harry. The books are named after Harry. Man, I was so bad. I was like, I like Neville. That's not Neville.
Oh, I think my best fangirl moment with Harry Potter when I was young was when the 6th book was about to come out, and there was a newspaper review, and there was a spoiler in it. And it was, if you want to see the spoiler, hold it up to a mirror, and you had to hold it up to a mirror and it would reveal what the spoiler was. And even though I didn't really want to know, I held this paper up to the mirror, and of course it was, Snape kills Dumbledore. And I just started crying, and my mom was like, what's wrong? And I was like, because Dumbledore is gonna die. And she was like, why did you hold it up to a mirror?
Why'd you do this? It's like leaves you to cry. Oh my god.
Oh, they should have known.
Every death that happened, my mom's like, what is this? Is she obsessed with killing people off? Like, she would get so mad.
Yeah, even though I didn't like Sirius, I was never happy with how he died. I was actually really big into the fanfiction community that thought he was going to come back, because it just was so abrupt. I was like, oh, he's going to come back, right? And then he was just gone, and okay.
I kind of was like, come on, J.K. Rowling. Give him a family member. By the way, something that's mentioned, I believe, in the books. So Harry and Draco are like distant cousins, kind of.
Are they? I don't remember that.
Well, like, maybe I read it somewhere else and it isn't in the book, and it's like been so long that I think it's part of the book. So Sirius is related to the Blacks.
Mm-hmm.
So Narcissa Malfoy,
Yes.
was Andromeda's sister,
Yes.
which is Sirius's cousin.
Yes.
So
Yes.
in a way, Harry's like distant cousins to Draco.
It doesn't stop the Drarry shippers. Nothing will stop Drarry.
I know. I was kind of like, when I read Drarry or when I've seen it, I'm like, don't people know they're cousins? Like, but then again, Game of Thrones. So.
Oh, Game of Thrones, Supernatural. It doesn't matter.
So, I think it's, I don't know if you watch Game of Thrones.
I'm a bit behind, but I'm a marathon watcher, so now that I've got a lot to catch up on, and also because people want me to do Daenerys, so I'm gonna do that, so I've gotta catch up on all my good Game of Thrones.
You know of the ship because of the internet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that ship, which you'll come to find, I don't want to ruin anything for you, but like, yeah, a lot of people are like, I totally ship it, and I'm like, but why? Why? Like, I did too, and then I was kind of like, oh.
It's like, I kind of forgive, I know this is going to sound like the worst sentence, but I kind of forgive incest in period pieces where it was period typical.
My dad said the same thing when we were watching the scene. He was like, well, it was the time period. And I was like, how can you say that? No!
Well,
But
that was
everyone I know was like so excited about them, so you know that they're
yeah. Oh, don't worry. I'm a huge. Ever since the newspaper fiasco, I've really embraced spoilers, and
That's another thing. Like, I don't care about spoilers because I'm kind of gonna read it anyway if I really want to read it, and I'm gonna probably still have the same reaction because that's spoilers out of context of the actual text of what's happening.
that's how I feel as well. I can understand for some people they just want it to be completely new and they don't want to know anything, and I get that. But for me, it's not going to affect whether or not I watch something, read something, because once I know it, I'm more interested to see how they execute it. Just like, okay, this is going to happen, but how? Although sometimes it says, I find that with trailers a lot, they're getting pretty bad, like spoilery. I just recently saw Thor 3, as you probably saw, I was tweeting up a storm about it. And it's just, it would have been so much better if they'd kept the Hulk out of the trailers and it had been a genuine surprise when they showed up on the planet and he was there. And I was watching that, and I was just like, oh, it's poor marketing.
I mean, yeah, I've been watching trailers recently, and I'm like, good God, this is like the whole movie.
It's like we've gone back in time to the 60s, because that's how trailers used to be in the 60s. They would just narrate the entire event, and I feel like we've gone back in time to that, and I don't want that. I want mystery. I don't want to know what's going to happen. I don't want to be misled, but I'd like there to be some surprise, I guess.
Like, even with Star Wars Episode 8, I'm like, oh God, no, now we might, I mean, even if it might be a misdirection. I don't know if you saw the Star Wars Episode 8 trailer.
I've actually managed to avoid it, but I have had people, like, messaging me that now we need an update on certain ships and the like, so, yes.
I have to actually do a Star Wars discussion on the trailers, because I have, like, one fan on my channel who's like really into Star Wars. It's like, when are you going to do Star Wars? Like, comment on things that aren't Star Wars and ask me when I'm doing Star Wars. He's really sweet, so thank you out there, one forceful.
At least you have someone who wants Star Wars. I love Star Trek, and no one on my channel, like, or at least it doesn't feel like anybody cares about it, so I feel like I'm shouting into the void whenever I bring it up.
One of my really good friends is the hugest Trekkie in the world. She actually has this, she does, like, modeling, and she did this really awesome, for, like, I think Star Trek's anniversary or whatever, I don't know what it was, but she dressed up with the Spock ears and a shirt.
Nice.
I was like, that's pretty cool. So, she's really into Star Trek. So.
How do you feel about all the crossovers? Like, with, like, Harry Potter, I feel like people cross Harry Potter everywhere.
Okay. So, as much as I love Star Wars and Harry Potter together, I like the idea. I don't know, like, I tried to write, like, a couple of sentences to see how it would be executed together, like, to write it out in a story, and it felt weird. It just felt like maybe these two don't belong.
Yeah,
I like the idea. It needs to be executed correctly.
That's the thing. I love crossovers, because when they're well executed, they're excellent, but when they don't work, it's very much just people slamming two things together. I've read some really odd official crossovers, like the X-Men and Star Trek crossovers that exist. Yeah, there are comics of X-Men, Star Trek. They meet in like a parallel universe time frame.
That's amazing.
And it is, but at the same time, it's just very awkward, because they're like, oh no, we've crossed dimensions. Look, the X-Men. And it's like, well, I'm glad they're here, but this still doesn't make a lot of sense.
I typed in Harry Potter crossovers, and I have this awesome photo somewhere. I, like, saved it on my laptop of Harry and the Punisher meeting.
That's great. That's really great.
I was like, yeah, that would totally happen somehow. You know. And I was like, that's a really cool idea. But yeah, I don't know how Harry would meet Luke and Leia, or like I like the Sherlock one. Like, I'm really trying to execute a really good Sherlock fan fiction where Harry meets Sherlock, and then like Molly or John or a wizard or witch.
It's got some good building blocks, because you've already got them in the same location, which is good. And the time periods are already pretty similar, so you don't need to do too much jumping of time or space or anything. So
yeah,
so you can just kind of do like a Muggle world and Wizarding world already existing, like, alongside. That would be cool. I'd love to see Sherlock discovering the Wizarding world. I don't think he'd like it over much.
I don't think he would at all. And I was trying, like, I want to make him. I know a lot of people are like, Sherlock's totally a Ravenclaw, but I'm like, no, he's a Slytherin. Like, I see him in Slytherin. So.
I know, I can see that too. Don't let the blue scarf fool you.
Yeah. And I'm like, he's cunning, he's resourceful, he's everything Slytherin, and then, like, his brother can be Ravenclaw. Have you ever sat down and, like, for example, with Sherlock or other fandoms and kind of placed them into houses just for fun?
Not so much. I do enjoy it when I see it. Rebecca's way more into that than me. She does that all of the time. But sometimes, like, whenever I see, especially in fan art, when people do the drawings of everybody in their appropriate houses, I like to imagine whether or not I could actually see them placed in there or not. Similar to, like, whenever everybody makes people into Avatar, like, they give them an element, that would be the element they wield. It's the same kind of thing for me, where I'm like, would they actually be that house or element? I'm intrigued, so.
How do you feel about the trio being all in Gryffindor? And do you think the story could have worked if Ron was a Hufflepuff, Hermione a Ravenclaw, and Harry a Slytherin?
I think it could have worked. I think it would have been a bit more difficult because it required more work to get them into the same location, because at least if they're all in the same house, it's very easy to have them all in the common room or all meeting in the same place, having the same classes. Whereas I feel narratively it's a bit more of a workaround if you have them all in different places, even though I do really like the idea of Hermione as a Ravenclaw. Because by having all of your heroes in the one house, it's easy to understand why it appears that there's such a heavy Gryffindor bias in all of the novels, because all the good people are from Gryffindor. All of the characters you follow mostly are in Gryffindor, unless they're villains or side characters, and then they're in other houses. So it very much seems to inflate the importance that Gryffindor has, and it makes it like Gryffindor's the good house, Slytherin's the evil house, Ravenclaw's the smart house, Hufflepuff's that other house. So
the other. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it's so interesting to me because my dad was like, I was rereading I had an argument, not an argument, but like a very heavy discussion with my mom about where Hermione should have been placed. Mm-hmm. And in the middle of this discussion, I took out the first book and I read that part when they're on the Hogwarts Express where she says, like, Ravenclaw would be okay, but Gryffindor here is the best. So right there, you have the bias of just her being like, even though I'm smart, I want to.
This is the cool house. I want to be in the cool house.
Which just speaks a lot to how all, like, kids are, though. Like, wanting to be cool, wanting to, you know, even if we are smart, we don't want to always be seen as that, you know.
I just, maybe as I grew up, and even before I became a mom, but especially since I've become a mom, it's the house rivalries bother me a lot more than they used to. I'm like, school, you need to stop encouraging these rivalries between these children.
No, yeah, I'm always like, hi. Like, why are they arguing? Why can't there be, like, why can't they all just get along?
I think that's why I really liked 4 when they had the, even though it was the most dangerous games of all time, I really liked the tournament because it kind of united them all together as a school instead of them competing against each other house-wise, which they still were, but they had something to, like, root for as a group. Like, our school is going to beat those other schools that we don't know a lot about.
Exactly. And that's another time I saw that there was perfect potential for, like, even though Draco was still snotty because it was like they're 14, but I was like, this would have been a perfect time for everyone to come together, like, and be friends. Like, this would have been great. And I was so. Can we talk about the fact that Ron's sort of tantrum about Harry getting his name in the goblet? And he was sort of. I feel like that was character.
I kind of liked it. Because I did like the idea that people would be jealous of Harry. I know that was one of the things that made people really dislike Ron, but it actually made me like Ron more because it rounded him out a bit for me. It was like, yes, this is his friend, and he cares about him, but maybe he wishes that some of that attention would come his way. He's already one of a million kids. He doesn't get enough attention as it is. And now and the other thing is, too, because Harry would complain about it all the time. It wasn't just like, oh, this, like, from somebody else's perspective. This awesome thing happened to me. Now I'm the champion and everybody cares about me. It was, oh man, again, everybody cares about me still. And so I could see why it bothered Ron, maybe because it was one of the things that bothered me, where it was, yes, I know your life's not perfect, but at the same time, be grateful that so many people do care and are trying to help you and are bending over backwards, even though all these things that would get other people expelled, you're still managing to be at this school and fine.
Yeah.
Oh, that was the scene for me in the movie that was really disconcerting. When Dumbledore comes in and, like, shakes him, like, physically, like, did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire?
I know. I was like, and in the book, there's so many memes and
Yeah.
videos on that. Calmly states. Someone wrote, like, if they ever redo Harry Potter in a series, they need to make sure Dumbledore says it calmly. I'm like, that's like the most important thing out of the entire thing. But yeah, I mean, that scene, I was like, but why? Why would he shake him? Why? That scene bothered me. How do you feel about Rita Skeeter? Because people didn't like her, and I was like, she's an interesting character, even though she's terrible.
I think she's interesting. I don't think you're supposed to like her. I don't think you're supposed to like Rita Skeeter. I think she's supposed to make you feel slimy and oily, like being around one of those tabloid journalists in real life who's always just trying to exploit something for money or their own gain. So yeah, she didn't bother me. Like, but I can see why people really didn't like her and wanted her to get out of there. But for me, she fulfilled her purpose, because I kind of felt that was her purpose, to be disliked and to make you realize that there were people out there who were trying to exploit Harry and his situation for their own gain.
Right. True. How do you feel about the whole Mafalda Weasley not making it into the canon?
I'm pretty ambivalent when things don't make it into canon, just because there's so much, and I always worry about the reverse syndrome, which is what I like to call Lord of the Rings syndrome, where everything makes it in and it's just too much, and like you start to get even discarded ideas or things from half-finished books and they're all coming in. So I'm kind of like, sometimes I don't mind some cuts if people feel that they're necessary, or if they're going to streamline the process a little bit.
You asked me about the epilogue. How did you feel about Ginny, Harry, and then also Draco, the Astoria is specifically what I want to talk about.
Draco and Astoria. I did feel like it came out of nowhere. And I was glad for, that was the one thing I was glad for the Cursed Child, because it did kind of round Draco out a bit more and give him a bit more to do. Whereas the epilogue was very much, look, he's still alive. He has a wife now. I guess he must be okay. Look, his kids are getting on the train. He must be all right. And it just felt very brushing him aside.
And they gave each other that curt nod, like,
yeah,
you see each other as equals.
Manly adult nod. Just.
I wonder if that was written in the script, manly adult nod.
I really hope that that's how it's written. Just like every time I see the single teardrop, I hope it's written single manly tear. Cause the epilogue, I didn't like it because I felt it closed too many doors. I do understand that people wanted to know what happened to them because it's, oh, this amazing stuff, where are they now? But I almost wish that had been left up to fans' imaginations of where are they now. Most people knew that Ron was going to marry Hermione, and probably a lot of people would have followed along with the idea that Harry was going to end up with Ginny. But I feel like it would have been more interesting to leave it open, or instead of just having their kids going to Hogwarts, just have something different. I don't even know if I would send my kids to Hogwarts after everything that happened at that school.
Oh, that's a bad place. You're going to Overlord.
Because it opened up so many other, like, that was the other thing with the Cursed Child. I didn't love how the children were written. I know a lot of people were really just, they jumped onto the Scorbus bandwagon, and that was enough, and that was fine. But for me, I was like, I don't feel these kids are very fleshed out. And I had read fictions, again, from before this came out, where there was so much more going on with, for example, even say Teddy, the hot pink werewolf. Where was Teddy?
I was like, where's Teddy? Because he was you know, he should have been older than them and, like, you know, could have been, like, this really cool Hufflepuff and, you know.
Yeah, like, I was interested in, again, it was the focus was a bit narrow, and I would have loved to see it expanded to some of the other people outside of Harry's little inner circle of people. Yeah.
And I'm really upset about, well, everyone now, because of canon, everyone's like, well, I guess it's fine with the Luna and Neville, like them never being together, and you know, Luna marrying Ralph Scamander, which I feel like was totally planned by J.K. Rowling, so that, you know, when that piece came out, there was like a link.
Yeah.
Other than the similar worlds, it's, you know. And then Neville marrying Hannah, which I was like, when did they ever talk? Like, when did that happen?
Happened off panel, like everything else with Neville.
Here in New York, there's a play. I don't know if they're gonna go to Canada or wherever, but they it's called Puffs.
Okay.
And basically, it's their tagline is happening at a magical school with a other famous wizard, and the whole thing is like what everyone else was doing at Hogwarts.
That's amazing.
World. And I was like, I need to see this. This just sounds hilarious.
That's so good.
Yeah. So I was like, great. That's a great idea. The idea of like what's happening in the other houses. Well, mainly Hufflepuff.
Like there are so many other series where they rewrite it from other perspectives. Looking at you, Twilight and 50 Shades, and they're not series I want that to happen in. It's just like, no, give me this in the Harry Potter series where I actually want this to happen. Oh, how did you feel about, like, I always wish there was more information on the mythological creatures in Harry Potter. I was always more fascinated with the vampires, the werewolves, you know, the centaurs, all of that.
There's so much that I wanted to know. Like, I loved, like, when I found out there were mermaids in the Great Lakes, like, my imagination was always like, oh, well, if the squid's in the lake, what else is in the lake, you know? And when it was confirmed that there were mermaids, I, of course, immediately thought of, like, I didn't think they would be exactly like, you know, the Little Mermaid, like Ariel. Like, okay, they're probably not that. But I didn't think they were kind of the way I imagined them, just more uglier in the film.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I imaged them scaly and green and blue and grays, but I didn't think they'd be this terrifying.
That brings up a good point, actually. When you were watching the movies, was there anybody who just completely did not match what you were imagining at all? Like, oh, really?
Yeah. Well, like, the way I see Voldemort and the Dementors, I was like, this thing is supposed to scare you to a point where you're like, I don't want to look at the screen. That's how I imagine it in my head, this terrifying force that's not human. Dementors really weren't human. I want it to be so terrifying, like any horror film. Like, no one actually looks at, like, for example, The Exorcist when she's on screen. Everyone looks away because it's terrifying. That's what the feeling you're supposed to have when watching, like, you're supposed to feel like, Jesus, I don't want to look at this at all. So it's, I felt like when I saw him on screen, I was kind of like, that's it. He just doesn't have a nose. Where are the red eyes?
He's just a little bit of a snake man. Yeah.
This is it. And then the Dementors, I was kind of like, they're just floating cloaks.
Did you find, because there were a couple of characters like that for me, did you ever find that because of that, it altered how you thought about them? Oh, hold on. My mother-in-law is back with the baby.
Oh.
So I actually have to go. So
Okay.
yeah, but it was really great chatting with you.
You too. It was wonderful chatting with you.
It was so much fun, and I think we should do it again.
I totally think so. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Awesome. So I'm going to link all of your stuff down below, and thank you so much for doing this with me, and I'm so sorry I have to dash off so quick, but...
No problem. Thank you for taking the time to do this. This is awesome.
Yeah. All right, we'll talk again. Thank you.
Thank you. Definitely. Will do.
All right. Bye-bye.
Hopefully that was a good time. Sorry about the abrupt ending. We completely lost track of time. We were having so much fun. So I didn't even get to answer which characters didn't match my head expectations, my head canons. They didn't look how I thought. Can you guess? See if you can guess which characters they were down below, and I'll answer down there, of course. And are there any characters that didn't match what you were expecting? Please leave those down below as well, and let me know if you enjoyed this and if you're excited for more. I certainly am, and I hope you are too. If you're interested in seeing how you can participate in the series, then please check out the video I mentioned in the intro down below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and let's get to that outro. This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Special thanks to all my patrons, names on the side, and as always, stay tuned, for there is many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.